right at the beginning, and I just turned it on right after it ended, so I messed that up. But everybody, it's Darren here with Genfinity. Today we have Scott Chamberland from EverNode. Welcome, Scott. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Darren. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having us on.
Sure. So I wanted to start off and just kind of ask you an introduction about yourself and how you got into crypto.
So I was a practicing lawyer, then I became an academic, and the focus of my work was innovative delivery of legal services, new law and that sort of stuff. And blockchain became one of those aspects of new law, blockchain smart contracts. And so that became part of my research. And then in 2018, I was successful in becoming part of Ripple's UBRI University Blockchain Research Initiative, specifically to research smart contracts within the XRPL ecosystem was what I was focusing on. I'd dabbled in cryptocurrencies and bought some XRP and that sort of stuff. And around 2018 was when the beta version of Codius was announced. So there was the prospect that you could have very flexible smart contracts within the XRP ecosystem, and that would allow for a wider range of smart contract use cases. So that was the beginning of my journey in this space, I guess.
So from a lawyer's perspective, what do you think of like the transparency and trackability of blockchains? Do you think that's going to really help out in legal matters, or is it going to add more complexity to it?
Well, it's certainly helped out in terms of tracing fraud for people who've used blockchain. So, the people who exploit smart contracts and stuff, they're finding it very hard to get away with their ill-gotten gains because you can track them so easily. But it's not. I haven't found that's necessarily the great big sort of issue or benefit. You're talking about trust. All of our institutions are about scaling trust so that people who don't know each other, people outside family and clan and kin, can deal with each other. And this blockchain is just the latest new tool for being able to scale that sort of trust. And there's sometimes it does it really well, and sometimes it does it in a really clunky way. But it's a new potential institution for being able to do a lot more with less when it comes to allowing strangers to trust each other.
Yeah, it also seems like a lot of the law enforcement just aren't interested in like crypto cases, right? They must get so many submissions of hacked wallets and things of that nature, and they just put it on the back burner. Seems like,
well, it'd be somewhat similar to the Nigerian Prince email scam type stuff, right? Like, it was a scam. It's gone. We've never been able to trace. So your money in that sense. When you get scammed by by that Nigerian prince who seems to be very good at scamming everyone, you've used email. You've used Google's email. You've used your internet service provider. You've used your bank and sent money to their bank, and you can't track it, right? And it's gone. So there's nothing special and unique about crypto in that sort of sense, except that with crypto, you've got a stronger chance of being able to track it and at least throttle it when it finally reaches an exchange. It's all very well to send money around or to send value around your network, but at some point, if you want to off-ramp it, that's the choke point. And they're getting caught at the choke point.
Right. So how does what is EverNode and how does it work?
Right. EverNode is it's quite a unique architecture, designed by Richard Holland, and it is a DePIN, a decentralized public infrastructure network, and it's in 3 layers. So we find it easiest to explain it in these 3 layers. You begin with this concept that you want a smart contract. You want it to be as super flexible as possible and do as many things as possible. So Richard's insight was that, hey, look, the XRP ledger is basically a payments app built around a consensus engine called the Ripple Consensus Protocol. What if you could take the payment app out and put any app you wanted in there? So it was any input and any output and maintained a canonical state using your UNL consensus. And so out of that was born a piece of software called Hot Pocket, which literally does that. It maintains consensus on inputs and outputs and canonical state on multiple instances of an app using UNL consensus layer. So I can now have multiple copies of my software on multiple machines, connect those machines together into a mini blockchain using Hot Pocket. And that app will function exactly like any other app. It has all of the functionality that a normal app would have, but they're going to do it in concert with each other, each of my instances. That was fantastic. The problem was you get something that's decentralized, but all of the machines had to be spun up by the same developer who would upload it and select the UNL and tell it who to trust and all that sort of stuff. And so if you own all the machines, then there may as well just be one machine. So the next layer was some decentralized hosting, and that's a thing called Sashimono. And what Sashimono does is it takes a Linux host and splits it into multiple slots and offers those slots for sale. And now I can upload a Hot Pocket instance into each of those slots. And now I can stitch together my blockchain or my dApp from multiple machines that I don't own. So each of those slots in Sashimono provide the Hot Pocket consensus layer. So the developer doesn't have to provide that. All they have to do is select which machines to upload their instance into. So now I can go into the marketplace. If I need 20 slots, I find 20 slots on different machines, choose the countries around the world that I want the slots on, and Hot Pocket does the work of stitching that together into a network of 20 nodes. That's fantastic, but now I need to know who's on the network. I need some way of finding my way around this network. It needs a register. It needs some other bits and pieces to coordinate it, and that could have been one single server, but you don't want your network registry on one single server. That would make it completely centralized again. And so we use a layer 1 blockchain to manage that process. And the one that we've chosen is Xahau. We were originally going to launch on the XRP ledger, but the XRP community didn't go ahead with the hooks technology. And so we've ended up on Xahau as it has the hooks technology, which is the light smart contract implementation. How do we use that? There's 4 hooks or 4 smart contracts that are on Xahau that manage the EverNode network. Firstly, there's a registry hook, a registry smart contract. People pay 500 Evers, and in return, they get back a registration NFT, and that's what confirms their membership of the network. Basically, they're saying, hey, I'm a Linux host. I'm running the EverNode hosting software. I'm available for people to upload dApps into my slots. The second thing that it does is there's a hook that controls the heartbeat hook, which controls the distribution of Evers. EverNode has has its own currency for transactions on the EverNode network, and that currency is an issued asset on the Xahau ledger, and a hook on Xahau governs the distribution of that currency, and most of it's distributed to hosts as rewards for being members of the network. There is a third hook that is a governance hook, and it controls the process by which people who are registered on the network can vote to change any of the hooks. And finally, there's a a beta version at the moment of a reputation hook, which is a way of making sure that all of the hosts on the network are quality hosts that are capable of hosting dApps. So all of that together, all of those hooks are open source. They're completely decentralized, and that regulates the network. It's effectively a way of nailing the network to the Xahau ledger. From out of that, we get a completely decentralized network of Linux hosts running hosting software that is uniquely tailored to hosting highly flexible and very powerful dApps. And what makes it powerful is with the EverNode software, you can do your dApp can be in any language, any POSIX compliant language that is capable of running on a Linux machine. You can have any behavior. Your dApp can do anything that a normal app would do. So it can read, write data. It can connect to external services. So it can have a native Oracle function, go off and fetch some data, bring it back, and perform complex computation. You can do it at any scale. So you choose, do you want your app running on 5 instances, 15 instances, 20, 50, that trade-off between cost and security. You make that call, and that's the number that it can upload to. As many as you want or as few as you want. And you can do it in any geographic location. So you can tell your dApp to only upload itself to hosts, say, in the EU, which would avoid GDPR issues that otherwise plague blockchains because you're sharing data across borders and all that sort of stuff. We get something decent and very powerful.
Yeah, so you mentioned that the app developer gets to choose the different nodes. So in that sense, is there like an economy that happens where app developers can outbid each other, maybe give more, add more hours to the node providers and try to, I don't know, make them do more resource heavy computation in order to get more hours or something to that effect?
Sure. So the way the market works at the moment, when you create your host, the Sashimono software will create a lease, will mint a lease NFT for each of your slots. And that lease NFT is what gets offered on the Xahau DEX for people to purchase. And that sets out your specified rent in Evers per hour that someone must pay to keep that slot open. So I can go into the DEX, acquire that lease, and that represents an exclusive right to upload code to that particular slot, provided I keep paying the rent in Evers. That rent can be whatever the host has specified as rent. There is, in the system, there's a cap where if you want to continue, all of the hosts on the network earn network rewards. Every hour, it's currently distributing 1,200 and something Evers equally to every host on the network. So that 1,200 is split between every reliable host currently registered on the network. In order to qualify for that reward, you've got to meet some reputation requirements. And one of those is that you're not offering your slots for a rent that's higher than the minimum, higher than the maximum rent, which at the moment is 0.12 Evers per hour. So if you want to earn the rewards, you've got to have a reasonable rent, but you can charge whatever rent you want. And then when you go and look at the network at the moment, you'll see there's some exceptionally powerful machines on the network. There's some mid-range machines on the network, and then there's a bunch of quite small machines on the network. So there is already an economy, if you like. There's a range of potential hosts to choose from. And the use that we've seen so far suggests that when people come to upload something to the network, they are tending to choose the bigger, more reliable hosts to upload their code to.
Sure. So you also mentioned read-write computation. So is the Linux host, is that kind of what I'm renting out? So I could do anything that's capable on Linux on EverNode, is that correct?
Yes.
So
yes.
awesome. Read-write computation, but also bandwidth as well as CPU power, GPU power, everything a computer could do.
Yep.
Awesome. And it's almost like it's a, I don't know, layer 0, right? Where it's connecting all different subnets because each app has its own consensus of hot pockets, right? So why would you need your own consensus for an application versus just a chain in general?
So, well, yes, you come back to your point. Yes, it's basically layer 1. So each of the dApps are effectively their own mini blockchain, the way that it's structured, with its own canonical state. And if it had, you could have your own token, your own assets that do no more than exist inside your the dApp, the chain that defines your dApp. And in that sense, each of the dApps are a layer 0 themselves, with the capacity to connect to other layer 1s, right? So you can have inside your EverNode dApp could be the capacity to control an account on the Xahau network or the XRP network and push assets around the XRP ledger, by a consensus decision of the dApp, if you like. Why do it that way? Because that's how we get the maximum flexibility. You're getting the power that you get from the dApp. You're getting everything that you could otherwise do with a Linux machine, but now I'm doing it in concert with my dApps. I'm getting that decentralization component. One of the things decentralization should give you is greater reliability, more resilience. The other thing that we find that decentralization gives you is it distributes the power. So it really helps to disintermediate middlemen. If a lot of the use cases that we've looked at for EverNode, they're kind of, they're political in nature. We've got a project called Digital Cows, which is looking at tokenizing Australian cattle. If we did that without a decentralized system, you have the problem of, well, who's going to own the database? Which industry association is going to have that power? Who's going to get rich? And who's going to be the new Uber middleman in the middle of the cattle industry? Well, the answer to that is nobody. What happens is, if you want to join the network, you run an instance. It's a database that everyone has a copy of. It's a database that everyone can see. It's a database that no one owns, or that everyone owns. Take your pick. And that allows it to. It creates that space for it to actually be able to exist without people wanting to kill it off in its crib.
So when you have an image on another ledger, right, it's just kind of a placeholder. It's the metadata. So since Linux, clusters of Linux are decentralized, you can actually have the image. You can actually have the JPEG. So it's
in development, we had exactly that. We had a little thing we called EverDog, which was our own NFT toy, if you like, that was minting a version of a dog with various different slogans, and the data, the actual image is on chain. It's not a pointer to where the image might otherwise be. That's a completely doable. It's one of the potential use cases.
But also, like, bridging other assets could be redone in different ways, right? So bridging now, so like you wrap it in a wallet and you have a multi-sig wallet and it issues onto another network. But since you have those clusters of hot pockets, they could theoretically hold on to a key, split it up, and kind of bridge it in different aspects. You could have more secure versions of bridging.
That's again, that's another thing that we're looking at forever. Yeah, completely possible.
Yeah, it would be. I would think it would be more secure. So all the wormhole hacks and everything. You see hacks all the time. So it seems like it's more secure. So Privacy. That was the other thing that I noticed with the nodes. You're able to have privacy, and that's optional. I can turn it on or off. How does that work?
So, well, whether my DApp, who has access to my DApp, is something that I can control. So, other people may be able to get, like a view on what's happening on a particular DApp, or I can program it so you only get to see what's happening if you're a particular person or a particular member, or, so does the world know what data is on this ledger or inside this DApp? That's completely up to the developer to determine. There is the obvious issue that if I'm going to run my app on other people's infrastructure, at some point the person with root access of that machine has potential access to the stuff that's on the machine, and so you have to think about that from a security point of view. You can either, if privacy is super important, you would run your app on machines that are run by people you trust, or by people who are inside your own particular use case. So if I've got, take digital cows, for example, it's possible that it runs on EverNode, but it's only choosing nodes that are run by people who are inside the digital cows ecosystem. It's not simply run on, any machine on the network. Or the other option that you've got is that you run some of your instances on machines that you control, and the way that the keys are split up is such that all of the machines you control are necessary. You have effectively a veto right rather than a control right over how the app performs.
So it sounds like there's more than just private or public. There could be tiers to it. You could have almost permissions within a decentralized application. So you could have different tiers of accessibility, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's a really powerful use case, especially decentralized nature. I don't really see that, right? You see people handing out NFTs. It's like tickets for a Patreon type of service, but there's never one that's flexible to move to any tier. It's only hard gold, silver, or whatever, right? It's not.
Yeah. Well, and that's the limitation of the chain on which they're minting their NFT, or how they've got to go about doing it. But yeah, you've got almost complete flexibility. We've introduced now custom Docker images, so people can upload their own Docker images inside the ones that we provide as standard. And there's now access to non-consensus storage within the DApp. So there is data that you could be performing consensus on, and then there's data that's just stored. All of that allows for like long-running processes, things that are happening outside of the consensus round or independent of the consensus round.
So the XRP ledger, as I said, turned down hooks, but in the future, if they were to vote and to bring hooks onto the XRP ledger, would there be any flexibility for EverNode to speak to the XRP ledger, or is it solely for Xahau now?
Well, so when you say flexibility to speak to, there's an inherent interoperability function already, because and this happened when people created their Xahau accounts. It's possible to import an XRPL account onto Xahau, and that means you have the same R address and same keys on both chains. If you go into the Xamarin app, you've got Xahau and XRP ledger as different choices, and you're simply switching between the two. These are the assets I've got on XRP, these are the assets I've got in Xahau, and the account is the same account. The keys are the same, the account number's the same, the keys are the same. You're just looking at it from two different chains. What you can do is you can give the control of those keys, have a multi-sig account and give control of the keys to an EverNode cluster. And now I've got a way of interacting, in a decentralized manner with each of the different. I can have this. My app can have the same account on XRP Ledger and on Xahau, and EverNode can be poking each of those accounts as necessary to make something happen. So I could have a hook gets triggered on Xahau, and the cluster picks that up and says, well, because that's happened on Xahau, this should now happen on the XRP ledger, and go in and make a transaction happen on the XRP ledger. Or because it's accepted a transaction on the XRP ledger, pick that transaction up and now take it across to Xahau and use it to trigger a hook and do something else on Xahau. So that's an interoperability that we're really interested in exploring, because you get this, same account, same keys, with effectively EverNode acting as a bridge between the two. Could be some interesting ideas come out of that. In terms of if hooks comes onto the XRP ledger, we'd have to look at, do we replicate the 4 hooks that we've got on Xahau on the XRP ledger, so that we've nailed a version of the EverNode network to the XRP ledger. And that means having a multi-chain strategy. If it were possible for there to be multiple versions of the EverNode registry and all of those hooks, all of those smart contracts on different chains, what would be the strategy for making that happen? And that's possible. There's just an awful lot to work out to be fair to the existing community that we've got. So it would have to be something like, we're now launching on another chain. That means that everyone who's already got Evers, we have to match the distribution of the Evers. We have to, allow for airdrops and all that sort of stuff. It's sort of got to begin. It can't begin from scratch. It's got to begin from the same point that the current network is at, and everyone's got to be treated equally before the network starts, we think is what would be necessary for a multi-chain strategy. But if XRP ledger had hooks, there's no reason why there couldn't be an EverNode register on the XRP ledger. But then there'd also have to be an Evers issued on the XRP ledger, and that would have to match in some way the Evers that's already been issued on Xahau.
Yeah, and it could be one or the other, right? You couldn't have double the airdrop. You would have to burn one side or double.
Well, you may end up with double the airdrop, right? You may simply say there's been this many Evers minted on Xahau, so there's got to be this many Evers minted on XRP ledger, and that's got to be shared by everyone who's already, everyone who's already got Evers has got to be entitled to the same number of new Evers, so that you start from scratch. The issue with the burning and the minting is just, it's such an additional complexity. Like, you're relying on someone else to do all of that for you. So we saw Ripple's announced its new, bridge solution. It's not moving ahead with its amendment to the ledger for bridges. It's going with Axelar as a bridge component. Axelar, as I understand it, does a burn and mint sort of thing, using its own blockchain as the witness server in the middle. All of that burn and mint, bridges, it's
does it open up security vulnerabilities?
Yeah, security, like you can ruin your project in a day, right? Like it just takes one bright person to completely ruin your project and its tokenomics. That's a possible way of doing it, but it's there's a lot of complications with it. So the answer is in concept, yes, and in desire, definitely. In application, it may have to be some sort of Frankenstein solution.
I see. You mentioned kind of the security vulnerabilities, but I've listened to part of Apex, and David Schwartz was talking about just the myriad of different problems that you open when you have a blank canvas like EVM versus something like hooks. What are your thoughts on having specific guidelines on what you can build versus having something like EVM where it's completely open?
So I think what you're referring to is this ethic that, we don't give you the capacity to build an AMM. We decide that there should be an AMM, and we tell you what your AMM will be, right? We don't. we don't think that there should be a capacity for a DEX. We think that there should be a DEX, and so we give you the rules for the DEX. It just means slower development. It just means less innovation. It just means less. It just means, because until you get your amendment through, you can't do anything with it, right? So it's, you know, personally, I just prefer the composability. I prefer the freedom. You know, we couldn't, the way that we've used hooks isn't necessarily the way that you might have envisaged using hooks. And so if we were told, yes, you can have a side chain, but you've got to wait for the amendment that approves how your side chain works. Well, okay, then you don't get a side chain, because you never get the community involvement in who needs an EverNode? Doesn't exist. You know, no one, you know, we wanted it to exist, but does anyone else? Who knows? Like, well, we can take that risk, but having to convince a community that, you know, we should introduce this change and this potential vulnerability and all these potential bugs and all that sort of stuff into your ledger, that's hard. So yeah, I favor the tools rather than being given the tools rather than being sold the product.
So a lot of the validators on the XRP ledger, they were behind Xahau, right? Like there were a lot of the validators were the ones that pretty much branched off and started running validators on Xahau, and now you know, it's a lot of the community that pretty much decided to go with it. So it's, you know, but most of the community's on board, I would think. I speak to a lot of the people that run validators, and they seemed like they were on board. So I'm just kind of curious on, do you think it's reasonable for the XRP ledger to adopt hooks, or do you think it's just going to cause a shift where people migrate from the XRP ledger to different, like Xahau or EverNode, and kind of give up on the XRP ledger and move over?
So my view on hooks changed as we went through the process of launching Xahau. I began thinking that hooks was a no-brainer for the XRP ledger, and that it's something that should just happen, which is why we started building EverNode in the expectation that hooks would make it to mainnet. All right, so when we started building EverNode, hooks was still being built as well. So we had this problem of we were building technology on top of technology that was being built, and making educated guesses and calculated bets about where the future would end up. I now think that the people who were reticent about putting hooks on the XRP ledger were correct. And there's a reason for that. One is hooks had some significant breaking changes that would require a whole bunch of people to update their nodes and break things like across the ecosystem. So that's, you know, it's not just that the validators change. You would have exchanges that would suddenly be unable to connect to the ledger and all that sort of stuff. It would be quite a complex change to make. The other, though, is that hooks, this is an issue with the XRP ecosystem. XRPL chains burn their token in order to protect themselves from spam and bloat. In other EVM chains, the token is redistributed to validators as fees. So it's a very different model. And when you're burning the token, that works when you've got a ledger that's, you know, each transaction is pretty much the same, and so the fees are pretty much the same and they're quite low. What happens with hooks is you have to pay in advance for all of the computation that the hook might be called upon to implement, and that can result in fees that are orders of magnitude higher than the traditional fees that the XRPL is charged. And that means you're burning an order of magnitude more than you used to. And it's quite feasible to start burning too much. It's quite like, I know it sounds, there's 100 billion XRP and that sounds fantastic, but if everyone's got hooks and everyone's using hooks and everyone's doing stuff, if it's actually doing it, you can burn it quite quickly. When we look at the EverNode network, we've got 4 hooks there's now 11,755 hosts on the network. And each of those every hour are sending a heartbeat transaction. And then every hour the hook is sending out, rewards to about 11,200 hosts. The hosts themselves have gone and installed hooks on their nodes so that when the Ever's rewards arrive in their account, they're auto sent on to some centralized account that they control. So they've got 20 hosts, all of that rewards go to 20 accounts, and then their hook pulls it. So it's quite, there's a lot of fees being paid, and there's a lot of Xahau being burned just in maintaining the EverNode network. That meant that Xahau had to adopt a different tokenomics. Xahau has this thing called balance adjustments, where every month you can claim the equivalent of 4% per annum uplift in your Xahau account. And that's the mechanism that Xahau went with for putting back into distribution the Xahau that had been burned through fees. There's 600 million Xahau, and it would be very easy to burn that down to just nothing. Like if you didn't have a process for putting it into circulation, at some point there would be no Xahau, like there just would be no native token. So you've got new tokenomics that complicates things enormously. That makes it very difficult. So if hooks came to the XRP ledger, I imagine now, from the experience that I've seen, that I would expect the XRP ledger to need some mechanism for putting back into distribution stuff that have been burned. And it's a problem you get with the XRP. If it was a problem for Xahau even with the bridge, right? So if you were going to not have a native asset, instead your native asset was you're going to lock up XRP and mint Xahau XRP and represent 1-to-1 on these chains, and then you're going to use that Xahau XRP on your Xahau network, and that was going to be burnt in fees. Well, I transfer across, I use it, I burn it. Okay, I need to go get more XRP, transfer across, use it, burn it. Now I got to get more. Now I got to get more. So suddenly I'm siphoning XRP. I'm sending it here and burning it, and I've got to keep sending it and burning it and sending it and burning it. And now I've got a real problem, which is I've got a bridge which has got my own matching asset. I burned the matching asset. I've got 1 million XRP locked up, and I burned 1 million XRP. Well, that's a very attractive honeypot. At some point, someone decides, do you know what? This billion XRP that represents fees burned on Xahau, maybe we can just have it back. No harm, no foul. All right. So the fact that XRPL chains burn their fees rather than redistribute them is a complicating factor when it comes to pricing smart contract functionality on the ledger, and it requires new tokenomics, which is why Xahau has new tokenomics, and which is a debate I would expect the community to have if hooks came back to the XRP ledger.
So why does EverNode even need to be tied to any network? Why can't it just be a layer 1 for itself? Is that for liquidity purposes? I would assume.
It helps for liquidity purposes, but the real problem is, so if it was its own layer 1, it would now need its own DUNL, its own validators, its own everything that Xahau provides it, or the layer 1 provides it. It would need itself, and that's that's not an easy thing to do. Creating a decentralized UNL network, it's just not easy. You know, we would have preferred to be on the XRPL DUNL. It's, you know, even more robust, and it's a bigger ecosystem. But doing your own layer one, now you're off and you're disconnected. The real benefit we get, you know, our Evers as a token is as secure as the layer one that it's on. It's not. It feels more solid to be done that way rather than your own layer one completely disconnected from everything else. That doesn't feel nice.
That makes sense. What are you particularly proud of since you started working with EverNode? What's something that you're proud of?
I'm immensely proud. Well, I'm not proud of it because it's not my achievement, right? But the community, the guys that run the community Discord have been the biggest unexpected asset to come out of EverNode. There's 2,400 odd members of the EverNode Discord, and there's a bunch of guys on there that have done an enormous amount of work helping people spin up their nodes, introducing people to the process of being a network manager, writing specific scripts, and doing all sorts of really helpful, wonderful stuff that without all of that community involvement, EverNode, you know, you just couldn't do it all yourself, right? We've got some code, we've built it, we've structured it, and emerging from that has been a community, not just an ecosystem, but an economy. It was really surprising to us how quickly, you know, the economy developed. So one of the hurdles that we hit straight away was there were so many nodes in the EverNode network that the public infrastructure became overloaded. So what people don't realize is when they submit a transaction on the XRP ledger through Xammin and it's free, you know, it only costs cents. Yeah, that's because somebody's paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for servers that allow you to submit transactions through it, and they're not charging you for that. They get submission nodes that connect to the network. Well, very quickly we overwhelmed Xahau's free infrastructure, and we then had to have a rule. You know, they were going to throttle the amount of traffic they were accepting from EverNode hosts. So our hosts had to now not only run EverNode nodes, they had to run their own Xahau's submission node. And we thought, oh, this is, you know, oh, you know, everyone expects everything for free. It's going to be a problem, blah, 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 blah. Well, no, very quickly people spun up their own nodes. Why? Because they wanted access to the rewards. And then others offered their nodes for other people. So you could get yourself whitelisted on someone else's node, and then you pay them 50 Evers, something, right? So very quickly, you know, there's one guy I came across, he's got 1,000 clients. He's got 1,000 other people using his Xahau node to submit transactions to the network. All of this economy just emerged. And whereas in the XRP space, it's like, you know, no incentive is the best incentive. You give everything away for free for the good of the community. Instead, we ended up with this economy where everyone was, you know, earning an honest living, providing a service that people valued enough to pay something in return for it. It's that sort of stuff that made us realize, you know, this has been structured correctly. It's you know, it's working. And so the community very quickly adjusted to this problem of needing a submission node. And now there's over 1,000 submission nodes on the Xahau network, most of them being run by EverNode hosts who just simply want to be able to reliably submit their transactions to the network. So Xahau is more robust as a consequence. I think it's like 600 nodes on the XRP ledger, and now that there's over, I think it's 1,100 nodes on Xahau.
Oh, wow. And so once the problem's there, the solution comes, and it's, you know, everybody's willing to pay an affordable price. It's
at the top of the tree is this, this heartbeat hook that is reliably distributing Evers according to a set algorithm, and it's just pumping it out and wanting access to that reward structure is enough structure to have an economy emerge. It's been that's been the most gratifying thing out of it.
Is it pretty straightforward to run a node? It's just running a Linux machine, or is it more complex than that?
It's well, I say I don't run a node because I don't have the skill, but it's reasonably straightforward, and the community has done an enormous job in helping people who've never run a node before, get their act together and start running a node. It's not, it's not complex, but it's not non-trivial from what I've seen. Your machine needs to be connected. You need to be able to diagnose, if it's not earning rewards, you need to be able to diagnose why, because there's a whole range of issues why that might be true. You're pointing it at the wrong IP address, or there's a whole bunch of potential reasons, and you need the skill to be able to troubleshoot some of that. It's not plug and play, and it's not passive, right? It's each of the hosts are basically a mini business, and some people have the skill and the temperament to manage that process, and some people don't. I'm one of the people who doesn't.
Okay. I'll be sure to check it out. See if I could do it. So, is there anything that I skipped that you think that is important to address?
So we had two strategic problems to solve when we launched EverNode. The first was that we needed to attract hosts to the network so that we had a network. And the second thing was that we needed to attract developers who were developing on the network. And it turns out that getting the network up and running was an easier strategic problem to solve than we expected, with 11,700 hosts, and that's like 70,000 hosting slots available for lease. At the moment, there's about 360 odd of those slots are occupied. So there's enormous capacity on the network. It's down to developers now. So people people getting their hands dirty with the EverNode SDK and discovering the kinds of use cases that they can build solutions to using the network. So if you are a dev and you're interested, reach out. We'll do what we can to help you, onboard you, get you started.
Since everything's a blockchain on EverNode, can a developer set up the SDK and kind of have an EVM machine on EverNode? Is that possible?
Yeah, we ran a toy version of that, an EVM cluster, where you could it ran the EVM. You could simply take your Solidity code, compile it, and upload it, and it would work. And that's open source. It's in the GitHub repository for EverNode. Our team didn't have the EVM experience to go the next step in terms of, just simply copy and paste and make it all work. But there's absolutely no reason why EVM stuff can't work inside an EverNode cluster. And we've proven we can do that.
Well, you probably have a large group of developers you can tap into at that point if people are able to choose what language they want to use, except for, just do the hooks that maintain the clusters. But and also you have a grants application I saw on the website. Is that correct?
No, we don't have any grants applications at the moment open. So we did have, when we launched, we had a bounties type feature, but we've found that incredibly hard to manage and to police. So we're revisiting how we do all the bounty rewards type stuff.
Oh, my mistake. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, can you tell everybody where to find you and how to get in touch with you if they have any questions on how to build anything or get involved in any capacity?
Sure. So you've been displaying, the main website is evernode.org. It contains the information on the EverNode network. Evernode.org, that's not the entity though, right? That's the project's website. The entity that is behind it all is an entity called EverNode Labs, and its website is evernode-labs.com.au. And on that website is a contact form, so you can use that to reach out.
Okay. Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure to have you on, Scott. I appreciate your time and breaking it down for me. I'm really excited. I kind of like glanced at everything, but I haven't like did an in-depth review of everything. So this was my impetus to do so. And it was great talking to you and hearing what you had to say. Appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Thanks very much for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Sure. Thanks. All right.